Welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Albert Chiu. South Korea is set to hold its presidential election on June 3rd. Jae-myung, the current frontrunner in the polls, has said that tensions in the Taiwan Strait are not South Korea's concern. Meanwhile, sources say South Korean and U.S. officials held a closed-door meeting in early May to discuss foreign exchange policy and agree to continue talks on tariffs. With the new president about to be elected, how will this shape the future of South Korea? Join us for the discussion today are Zhang Jinghe, National San Yat-sen University Graduate Institute of Political Science Assistant Professor, and Cai Rongxiang, National Zhongzhen University Political Science Professor. A very warm welcome to both on the show.
Thank you.
We begin with South Korea's presidential election set for June 3rd. Among all the candidates, Lee Jae-myung of the main opposition Democratic Party is currently leading with over 51% support in recent polls. Although Lee has tried to downplay his pro-China image during the campaign, observers are watching closely to see how his potential victory might affect the trilateral alliance between Japan, the U.S., and South Korea. The first question goes to Jinghe, is that South Korea's political situation is currently quite unusual. The country has experienced a 6-month leadership vacuum, and the current president is serving in an acting capacity several times removed from the original office orders. So, Jinghe, so based on your observation, how is South Korea handling the international challenges it faces under these domestic turmoils?
So the current political crisis may trace back to the last year's Korean National Assembly election. The result provides a divided government under polarization for the president who does not have much political experience, also does not have a good skill of persuasion and negotiation. So that is the case. That kind of martial law and follow of leadership vacuum, as you mentioned, is an extreme outcome of that kind of situation. Now, dealing with international agenda, what has been done is basically about keep it as it is, as it has been. In other words, foreign policy was basically about status quo. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, we already know that these days are unstable, rapidly changing. Mm-hmm. Given that, I believe and I hope that this election may put South Korea to be the normal stance, to be more actively engaged in world affairs.
Mm-hmm. Rongxiang, Lee Jae-myung is now in the upper hand, right, in the polling. So what if the situation continues and in the end he gets elected? What kind of change can we see in terms of South Korea's attitude towards Japan / United States versus China?
Yes, because he tried to adopt a more accommodating approach, especially to China, and he tried to hedge against so-called the very strong stance over China, because his policy is different from the current ruling party, People Power Party. Mm-hmm. So this can create a problem because especially when Japan and U.S., they have a firm stance against China, but for South Korea, they want to bury the hatchet and they try to follow the agreements before they sign with the North Korea. But the thing is that Kim Jong-un is unpredictable, and he likes to change things. He's not trustworthy, right? Mm-hmm. So the problem is that even you want to have a good relationship with him, but he wants even to have more, because last time I remember when Trump talked to Kim Jong-un, and Kim Jong-un said, oh, we want to partial denuclearization, but in exchange for total sanction relief. It's not a good deal for Trump, so Trump just walked away, right? So this kind of thing will happen in the South Korean new administration if Lee Jae-myung won the election. Mm-hmm. That's the possible scenario for South Korea.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Jin-He, I also have a further kind of question for you regarding the domestic electoral kind of campaign, the situation dynamic out there. We know that there are three main presidential candidates right now. Jae-myung is in the upper hand, is a front runner, but also on the other hand, you have the Kim Moon-soo, kind of inherited from the previous president who was impeached, but also you have the person in the third place is called Andy Lee Yoon Suk Yeol. So could you kind of help us, foreigners, to understand how they compete against each other? What's the strength and weakness of the three candidates?
There was a first TV debate held on May 18th, Sunday night. And then actually there were four candidates. The first one is Jae-myung, like the front runner, almost achieving more than 50% of popular support. And then second runner-up is Kim Moon-soo, who is still ambiguous stance with the former President Yoon, because he served as the Minister of Labor. And then third one, Lee Jun-suk, who was the party chairperson when President Yoon was elected, but after Yoon was elected, due to some political drama, he was get out of the party, and then he created a new reform party, and then he was able to elect it in the last National Assembly election, and then finally, Kwon Young-guk from the Democratic Labor Party. This party is really minor one, but unique. This party is social democrat, Western style of social democrat with some Korean characteristics of nationalism. And then, except for the last candidate Kwon, all the three agree that the good relationship with the United States, like military alliance and economic cooperation, especially free trade agreement with the United States, that is fundamental for South Korea.
There's a consensus, so to speak, among the four candidates.
The
three candidates.
Three, except for the last one. In other words, maybe outsiders can say that Lee Jae-myung may be pro-China, and then maybe the other two are more toward the United States. But all of them, like you said, that there is already some general consensus, except for the first one.
Okay. All right. I also learned that Lee Jae-myung is focusing on AI and South Korea's pop culture industry, which is now very hot, around the world, even in Taiwan. A lot of young people, they love the K-pop and stuff like that. He also vowed to make South Korea the world's #1 semiconductor powerhouse, and we know that the biggest competitor is in Taiwan, TSMC. That's for Lee. However, for Kim Moon-soo, he's focusing on job creation. Sort of like conservative, like old-fashioned, traditional one type of campaign platform, and building a business-friendly environment. He has said that if he is elected, he will immediately propose a summit with President Trump to begin tariff negotiations. So help us to understand their campaign strategies and also their platforms, their policy proposals in a domestic Korea. Please.
Let me first focus on Lee Jae-myung's stance. So like you said, economic growth, including AI, semiconductor industry, as well as high-tech industry, renewable energy, plus K-pop style of cultural industry. All of these things are something that Lee Jae-myung wants to sell to Korean voters. And then if he's elected, then he will get a really strong presidential power. He overcome the martial law, and he has more than 50% of popular support right now. And then he will get a legislative support. His party in the Korean National Assembly is really cohesive in a historical Korean politics structure. given then that he may be able to initiate a strong drive on those things. Now people is still wondering about, he has great ambition. Then what is his plan?
So there's no action plan that we can kind of see from his kind of vague philosophical type of arguments?
It is unclear thing. On the one hand, he wants to say that he is more of a pragmatist. On the other hand, he also wants to sell a lot of great vision, especially on domestic politics as well as economic development type of thing. And so at some point, there may be conflict within those agenda. In other words, at some point, he may have to show about how he will go through about all of his agenda.
Okay, according to Bloomberg, sources say South Korea sent Deputy Finance Minister Jae-myung to meet with U.S. Assistant Secretary for International Finance Robert Caprell in Milan. The two sides reportedly discussed their respective principles for managing foreign exchange markets and agreed to continue policy talks. South Korea's finance ministry confirmed that this meeting happened but declined to provide further details, with the newly elected president taking office immediately after the election. How big is a challenge that we will see, and also the U.S. Tariff negotiation would look like, and what kind of new variable could this introduce into these talks, Rongxiang?
Yeah, the thing is that South Korea is the third largest exporter of cars to the United States, right? So United States is the second largest source of imported automobiles for South Korea by 380 billion US dollars. And South Korea imported approximately 2 billion US dollars worth of cars from the United States. So this is a very, very huge trade deficit, right? But the thing is that for South Korea, they have a trump card because South Korea is good at shipbuilding capability, right? This is kind of a capability for U.S. right now is a little bit behind because U.S. needs to build up more ships, right? So for South Korea, they can leverage this kind of capability to support the United States. So it can help to balance the trade deficit between South Korea and the United States. So for Trump, he's a businessman. He knows that, right? He cares about the balance ship, right? So if South Korea can exchange that kind of stuff with the United States, I think they can get a real deal, a good deal in terms of tariff negotiations.
Let's shift our topic a little bit towards the cross-strait relations between China and Taiwan. Lee Jae-myung, the candidate representing South Korea's main opposition, Democratic Party, recently reiterated during a campaign rally that cross-strait issues have nothing to do with South Korea. He said, I said thank you to China and thank you to Taiwan. All we need is good relations with other countries. Whether China and Taiwan go to war is their business. So what does that have to do with us? Am I wrong in saying that? So my question goes to Jing He, is that Lee Jae-myung also rejected the pro-China label placed on him, even though he said that, saying his position represents pragmatic diplomacy. You mentioned that earlier. Could Lee's stance on cross-strait relations affect Taiwan-South Korea ties, or might it pose a potential risk to regional peace in East Asia?
I think there are three things I can address. First of all, the regional order related to South Korea. Mostly people want to say about US, Japan, South Korea triad. In reality, this is a combination of two dyads. One is South Korea and United States. There is a military alliance as well as heavy economic cooperation. And then the other one is US, Japan, as well as military alliance as well as economic collaboration. The issue will be South Korea and Japan. And in South Korea, all the politicians have to face with a strong Korean-style nationalism especially against Japan. It is related to some territorial issue and then historical issue.
All right.
And then about Lee Jae-myung's stance. He has a good record about local governance. On the other hand, it may be really difficult to say that he has really a good expertise in international relations, East Asian affairs, or regional order. So he may want to say that, or he wants to say he is pragmatist. Put it differently, he does not have something like a Lee Jae-myung doctrine on that. Probably most of the observers on Korean politics and East Asian affairs may acknowledge that there is some structural factor. And then even if someone wants to say that I'm pragmatist, there may not be really enough room to be really pragmatist. In other words, structural factor toward the new Cold War, if that is happening,
Right.
then it may not be about pragmatist style, but about some historical trajectory like the previous president have done in terms of East Asian affairs.
So you are suggesting that even though Lee Jae-myung would kind of distance South Korea from Taiwan, for example, in order to avoid provoking CCP in Beijing, but this is still kind of hard to do because he said that he has to take a side, like Yoon Suk Yeol, like he allied with the United States, allied with Trump, very obviously. But Lee Jae-myung tries to kind of distance himself from the previous president. Of course, they belong to different parties. But you think that's very difficult to do? Is it a daunting task for him if he's elected?
I agree with you. And then another theme will be, in Taiwan, almost all the political events as well as international affairs, people have a lens about cross-strait issue. On the other hand, South Korea does not have that lens. Instead, if there is something that kind of lens, it is not about cross-strait issue, not about United States PRC relation. Maybe it is about inter-Korean relations.
Okay. Yeah, but what about if, say, Trump now, of course, he's not really into this cross-strait relation. What about Trump someday, over the sudden saying that, the cross-strait issue should be on the negotiation table, and that's very important to my administration. And he would force the South Korea to, take the same stance as Trump or the Trump administration does. So would that make some difference? Or, likewise, if Trump said, now I'm going to, give more support to Ukraine, then, South Korea, we know that North Korean, right, they assign some soldiers to participate in this war, in Ukrainian war. So if that kind of situation happened, would you say that Lee Jae-myung still can remain kind of neutral somewhat?
First of all, I want to say that this is a great question, actually. Actually, in other words, I didn't think about that way. On the other hand, what I can say is that, first of all, within a short time frame, President Trump already get out of his honeymoon process.
Right.
On the other hand, Lee Jae-myung's case, if he is elected with a good popular support, and his honeymoon time period, he is really powerful. And so I already mentioned that structural factor does not provide for him too much space, but within a short period of time, then he is able to get some negotiation, hopefully get some, his pragmatism can act. Separately, I believe what Lee Jae-myung wants to suggest for President Trump as another card will be about how to deal with North Korea. Maybe we may remember that in the Trump first period, there was an interesting bromance between President Trump and then North Korea leaders Kim Jong-un. And South Korean, those Minju parties strengths lie in about how to deal with North Korean
Right.
government. And so that will be another interesting tweak that can make some potential change in terms of East Asian affairs.
But anyway, so far, Taiwan is still the distant issue for South Korea, as you suggested very clearly. What about you, Rongxiang? Do you think that the Jae-myung's so-called Jing-he mentioned the pragmatic diplomacy? As Taiwanese scholar, what kind of suggestion you would give us to the Lai Ching-te government about interacting with the South Korean government? Both of the countries, Taiwan and South Korea, are democracies and subscribe to freedom of speech. We knew that the previous president want to put the martial law in place, but faced a lot of backfire. So Rongxiang, what's your suggestion to the current administration in Taiwan?
Yeah. Presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung, he tried to stay neutral, right? He doesn't want to take sides. But the thing is that it's something to do with U.S. troop in South Korea, because that's the only troop which can come to rescue Taiwan, right? But the thing is that Lee Jae-myung is quite say, no, I don't want to get involved in this. But the thing is that it can create or maybe you can a problem for the alliance between U.S., Japan, and South Korea, because it will undermine alliance cohesion, right? Because when South Korea takes a different approach, but Japan and U.S., they try to say, no, North Korea is our biggest threat, and we have to deal with the China problem. So the thing is that it's kind of like, oh, what's going on about these three guys, right? You have a different tone with U.S. and Japan. So this can be a serious problem. So I would like to say it's very uncertain, because if you suddenly change the policy, before they try to bury the hatch with Japan, right? Kim Yeol try to say, okay, now it's over. We had a terrible relationship with Japan, but it's over because we want to unite against the same enemy, right? But for the coming election, maybe the presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung, if he won, right, he will change the whole foreign policy. So it can bring some uncertainty in this kind of situation. Yeah.
Okay. South Korea's geographic location continues to make it a key site for the presence of U.S. forces aimed at maintaining regional stability. General Javier Bronson, head of the U.S. Forces Korea, has repeatedly emphasized South Korea's central role in the Indo-Pacific. Lee Jae-myung said he would restore the September 19th, 2018 military agreements with North Korea, seek a harmonious relationship with North Korea, but pledged to strengthen deterrence capabilities against Pyongyang. He aims to reclaim wartime operational control from the U.S. while maintaining the U.S.-South Korea alliance. So what impact could this have on the current state of the alliance? Jing-he.
So again, think about the previous bromance between the President Trump and the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. And then Korean Peninsula has really strong geopolitical importance. Not only South Korea, but also North Korea.
Right.
It is really close to Beijing and Shanghai. In that way, if Lee Jae-myung and his party may revive that kind of romance, and then United States have some better relationship with North Korea, then it will make another East Asian order change, and that probably PRC does not want. In that case, now Taiwan politics or cross-strait relation will be also effective. Now, if United States has a diplomatic relationship with North Korea, let's say that was the previous goal of the previous bromance, then PRC has another borderline where United States has some relationship.
Like our show, subscribe to Time Talks. See you soon.